Hello, I'm Professor Congleton, and this is Public Economics 441 from West Virginia University. So today I'm going to introduce you to the basic structure of the course, some of the things you need to know in order to do well in the course, and also give you a sense of what public economics is about. So first of all, my apologies for being online throughout the semester, except for a couple of Zoom meetings that we'll be having. There was a spike in COVID infection rates in Morgantown in July, probably caused by opening the bars up. And as a consequence, there was a lot of pushback to the university's plans to open and have normal classes, or more or less normal classes this semester. So that's why we're online. Personally, I find this environment to be okay. I prefer not to be wearing a mask and talking to you, and you'd all be sitting in masks and in assigned seats instead of comfortably at your desk somewhere, watching these lectures more or less at your convenience. So one of the things I've done to adjust to the new situations, I've created a whole series of recorded mini lectures, all of which are roughly between 15 minutes and a half hour in length, so you can kind of chew on a piece of material and not be completely bored like you would be if you sat through 75 minutes of me talking. Okay, so I'm not a video performer. I won't learn to be one in the course of this semester or even in the course of this epidemic, I expect. But you can understand what I'm saying, and I have my little whiteboard, so it'll feel more or less like you're sitting in the front row listening to me lecture throughout the semester. So these mini lectures are intended to be say 80 to 90% of the course. There is a lot of material that I might have covered in class, or I would have covered in class, and written more on the blackboard or whiteboard, depending on the room, which I'm not doing in the mini lectures. So the mini lectures are focused for the most part on the geometry of public economics. That is, how you take rational choice models and use them to think about the consequences of public policies. So public economics is the study of how governmental policies affect the private economy. And that's the main focus of this course. But that process involves three different questions. One is, you might say, the basic positive question of going from policies to economic consequences. Right? And that's what we're going to work on for the first part of the course. Right? So part one of the course is really about the impacts of some basic government policies, namely raising money to spend and spending it on the private economy. Now, one reason you want to study public economics at this point in history is that public economics is a lot more an important subject than it was back in 1900 when neoclassical economics was being worked out. And in those days, GDP was much smaller, and the government's share of that GDP was much smaller. So instead of spending or directly controlling on the order of 40 to 50% of GDP as Western governments do today, back in 1900, the extent to which Western governments controlled or directly controlled economic resources was more like on the order of 10% of GDP or less. So that means that the public sector is 5 times as important now as it was back in those days, and that makes it an important subject. Essentially, the private economy is much more affected by government policies now than it was back in those days, and it's affected both by direct expenditures and taxation, but also through a whole series of kind of regulatory rules that have been adopted, over the past century. So in order to understand the private economy these days, you really need to understand how the public sector policies affect it. The other thing you need to know is where these policies come from. And the simplest way to draw that is to sort of add another loop to what I had up there before, and that is to think about, well, you have a policy, it has consequences. Those consequences generate some kind of political support or opposition to particular policies. And there's a political decision-making process through which those policies are adopted, and thereby affect the economy. So if you really want to understand the whole system, you have to understand or have a place in the model for politics. And we're going to use a model of politics that's emerged out of, mostly out of economics, called rational choice politics or public choice. And we're going to deal with just a few of the basic models, the ones that are easiest to fit into a course of this sort, but they are very powerful models, analogous to the perfectly competitive models that you learn in principles classes and in Real Micro. So I think, so the last part of the course, or I guess you'd say the last third of the course, which is a fairly good sized chunk, will be basically trying to add that loop to the model. Let's think about why it is that policies we observe are actually in place in a reasonably well-functioning democracy. The third question we want to deal with is, and we won't spend as much time on this, is there any systematic way to kind of judge or rank these policies and decide whether some policies are better than others or not? And if there are, can we use our tools, the geometric representations of markets and individual choice and politics developed in the course, to systematically evaluate the alternatives among policies? And the answer is yes, and that's one of the things we'll be doing in the course. So, if you think about this project, it's not a small one, right? We're going to be trying to deal with, in a sense, two big subjects, and the importance of these in terms of the real world is enormous. Right? You have, as I said, even the direct expenditures of governments now are affecting half of GDP. And so if you want to understand politics, if you want to think systematically about what good policy looks like, this is a course you really need to kind of go through. And the tool bag that public economics has worked out over the past 50, 60, 70 years is actually a very useful tool bag, a useful conceptual framework, a useful way of thinking about the way markets and politics interact. Okay, so in terms of the basic organization of the course, we're going to do policy into economics first, we're going to talk about normative theory second, and we'll talk about public choice third. And then fourth, we'll spend a little time talking about some applications. So, so you can see how these tools can be used to think about big issues like the size of Social Security programs, the national debt. And because of this semester, I think I'll also have a special lecture on the pandemic, on the COVID virus and political responses to that. Welcome to the course. I think you'll enjoy it, and I hope that you find this lecture format to be useful. Now, in terms of the logistics of this course, there are really three things you need to know. Okay, first we have a class website, which you can reach from rdc1.net. That's my website. So if you just punch Roger Congleton into Google, you will come up with my homepage, my website, and you'll see that on that page, over on the right-hand side, there's something that says class materials. If you go down a little bit, you'll see that there's something called public economics, and there are three links on that line, one of them being UG for undergraduate, and that's the link you click to get to our class website. Second resource is a YouTube channel that I created that has all the lectures, all the recorded lectures on them. So the recorded lectures are, as I said, 15 minutes to a half hour. There are on the order of 30 of these mini lectures for you to look at. Since it takes 2 of these to add up to one of my normal old-fashioned in-class lectures, basically it's like having one real lecture, one full lecture a week, plus a little bit more than that, I suppose. And so the lectures are intended, the recorded lectures are intended to be supplemented by lecture notes that you access from the class website. And the lecture notes are detailed overviews of longer versions of the lectures, and they also include definitions and some additional real-world applications to help motivate the study of the various parts of the course. And the definitions normally I would write on the board in a classroom, but in this case I'm going to count on you to look at the lecture notes and dig those definitions out. Those will be useful in terms of the final, your grades in the course. The third resource, and one that many professors would use first, would be we have an eCampus site. And the eCampus site will have backup copies of the lecture notes in case something goes wrong with my website, which it does in a great while. It will also have a link to the YouTube video, which you can find on the website as well as here. So this is like a backup, for the most part, to my class website, off which you reach by rdc1.net. But what you can get on the eCampus site that you can't get from my website is the quizzes, or are the quizzes, okay? So partly to kind of motivate you to kind of keep plodding along in the course, I've created 3 quizzes before the first midterm and 3 quizzes before the end term. So there are a total of 6 quizzes that you can take on the eCampus site. And those quizzes will be of the multiple choice matching type variety, and they'll be they're more or less just to allow you to get some feedback about whether you've mastered the material that you've been reading, and in a way that I think you'll find useful, and it'll also kind of give you some reason to kind of press forward, with the reading, with the viewing of the mini lectures. So the other triple we have, right? So here's a triple and here's a triple. The other triple we have is the way your grades are determined. So the grades are determined by the 6 quizzes, 2 exams, 1 term paper. So the quizzes, as I said, they're fairly short. Shouldn't take you more than 15 or 20 minutes to do in most cases. All these exams, of course, are open notes. I prefer them not to be open internet. That is, I prefer you to be focused really on your own notes, on the class notes, and also the supplementary textbooks if you choose to buy them. And the term paper is something you're going to write on your own. I always have a term paper as the last grade point in the semester. There are a couple reasons for that. One is that at a big university, students really don't get enough practice writing, so it's important to work at getting your ability to kind of put economic reasons and reasoning down on paper. And it's something that's hard to do on an exam format or a quiz format, because you're necessarily limited. Even if you have a more open-ended question where you write an answer out, you'll be writing a paragraph or 2 rather than 7 or 8 pages of material, and you won't have done any extra research to provide a fact base for what you're talking about. The other reason I do it is because When you study for exams and quizzes, you tend to be kind of piece-oriented. Oh, I need to know this bit, and that bit, and this bit, and that bit. And you tend not to focus as much about on putting these things together, trying to kind of see how all the pieces fit together. When you write a term paper, you're forced to do that. And in other years, other students have reported back that sometimes the light comes on, they suddenly see how all the pieces fit together. And even though I try to make that clear in the course of the lectures, sometimes if you're not mentally engaged in that effort yourself, it's not until writing the paper that last step of putting it all together takes place. So what I'm going to do next is I'm going to pause this a bit here, and then I'm going to go over and load the class website and show you what it looks like, and where you can find things. And that will complete my in-person, talking head version part of this lecture. And I'll see you in class when I go through this material on Thursday. So we've got the tape going. I'm trying to get the screen to show up. And if I'm doing this correctly, you should now have an image of the screen. Okay, so that's my website, rdc1.net. Over here is public economics, and over here is the undergraduate website. So if you look at the website, you'll see that there's an opportunity to click and get a PDF syllabus for the class. You'll see that I've ordered books in case you find the coverage of the notes to be inadequate. One book by Randy Holcomb, Public Sector Economics. That is a book that's a little below the level of this class, not quite as geometrically oriented or theory oriented, but presents arguments in a nice intuitive way, which many of you may find useful. Ari Hillman's book is a little bit above the level of this course. It's kind of in between this course and the graduate course that I teach on public economics. And for the better students, you'll find this useful as well. Neither book is necessary to pass the course. Do well on the exams. What really is necessary is that you watch the lectures, treat them seriously, take notes while you're watching them as if you're in class, because that is the classroom as far as this course is concerned. But also read through the notes. So if you go down the website a little bit, you see that there are links to various handouts. Some of these are more important than others. They all cover material that's useful for the course. Probably 3/4 of them provide another kind of tour through the same geometric tools that I did develop in the recorded lectures. But the other 1/4 is material that's not covered in those lectures, and as I said, includes both definitions and discussions in a way more carefully, more completely undertaken than I can standing up in front of the whiteboard talking to the screen. You'll find backups for all the lectures on this website. And it also informs you about some important events, namely the dates for the exams, first of which is September 24th, and the second of which is the week before Thanksgiving on November 18th. You'll also notice that there are a series of Zoom meetings, approximately a half a dozen of them throughout the whole semester. The first one is our first day of class on Thursday. Others are mostly around exam times. So there's a review for the exams in each case that we'll have on Zoom. And I'll stand at the whiteboard and answer questions the questions will mostly come from the study guides, okay, which are on the web. Just click on them and you'll pick up a study guide, which will give you a sense of the kind of questions we'll be covering on the exam. It also lists the eCampus quizzes, and you should take these quizzes when you complete the block that the eCampus quiz term, word, label appears after. So after we finish the review of economic tools, you should take the quiz. And then after we do principles of taxation, you should take the quiz. And then after we do externalities, you should take the quiz. And so forth. The last Zoom meeting will be in the last week of class. And I'm not 100% sure when I'm going to do it, but probably I'll do the first one on December 1st. And we'll talk in more detail about the papers. I'll also talk about the papers when I return the exams right before Thanksgiving. And probably also talk about them a little bit when we review for the second exam. And I don't encourage you to think too hard about the paper topics yet. You don't have the tools, you don't have the conceptual framework that I want you to apply in writing the papers. The point of the papers, the purpose of the papers is for you to take the tools from class and use them to analyze some public policy issue. And in order to do that, you have to have the tools. And you can hunt around for topics that you think might be of interest. And it's probably useful to start thinking about that about the time we get through the first midterm. Don't worry too much about that part of the class yet. To get to the lectures, you just click on this YouTube channel, and you'll get a picture of me and various lectures. The lecture I'm recording right now is to replace one of the ones I've already posted on the introduction to the course, and I hope to manage to replace it later this morning. So with that, I think I've completed all that I can tell you about the introduction. There's a longer discussion of how I've changed the format of the course to deal with the online delivery of the course, which was as much of a surprise to me as it was to you. We just learned about this about 2 weeks ago, so I've been kind of really hustling to get recordings online, and I'm still working on the eCampus quizzes. They should be, the ones before the first exam should be up and running later this week. And I will probably still be polishing the lecture notes and so forth during the course of the semester. Now, one last thing before I stop. The university has basically ruled out in-office office hours, meaning you are not allowed, or we are not allowed, to meet with students in our offices. I guess for fear of spreading the virus in one direction or the other. So instead, we're all having remote office hours, and I will have them on Monday and Tuesdays around lunchtime. And I have purchased a Skype phone number, 304-906-2209, which you can use to call me up at the office during office hours. Okay, and I will be, I'm at my desk essentially every day, and usually most of the day, but I prefer the calls to come in the late morning or early afternoon. And if you can't get through to me, just shoot me an email. Email is the most reliable way to get a hold of me. Of course, it means you can write a note any time of the day or night. But when you send it with a header. Put on the header, put in, public economics, so I know it's, relevant for the class and not just junk mail. Of course, I do have an office, and I do have an office phone, but those are basically irrelevant this semester because I won't be in the office to speak of during the semester. This is where we would have met had the class taken place physically. All the Zoom meetings will take place during our normal class time, and so I reserved kind of this synchronous spot for the half dozen times we'll be meeting as a kind of a class discussion group. I also want the exams, which are quite important, to take place during class time. I will email you the exams, more or less a few minutes before class time. And we'll all link on with Zoom, and that way if there are questions, you can kind of use the chat capacity of Zoom to ask a question. I can respond, and I'll respond to you directly if it's something only relevant to you. If it seems of relevance to the entire class, I'll just respond to everybody and send it out as a broadcast. And that way, if there are any glitches in the exam, we can take care of it during the exam. And also have a sense that everybody is there taking the exam. Also, there'll be Zoom meetings after the exam, and the point of that is that exams are learning opportunities, and if you fouled up on the exam, it's useful to know why, so you don't make the mistake the next time you run into the same sorts of questions. And my expectation is that the review sessions will be relatively short, because it doesn't take really that long to go through my exams. I always design them so they can be worked in about a half hour, 45 minutes, even though you have an hour and 15 minutes or so to get them done. These review sessions, however, the first ones, the ones before the exams, are very important, and you really need to show up for them. They are, most students find them really the most valuable lectures of the semester. So do show up with those, and show up prepared if you can, having looked through the study guide, worked some questions, and so forth. I will be in touch during the semester with email, partly to remind you to take the quizzes, partly to remind you and invite you to Zoom sessions. Hopefully it all will go well, and all the work I've put in and all the work you are going to put in will pay off, and you'll end the semester with a nice command of the main tools of public economics. So with that, I'll stop for the day, and I'll see you on Thursday with the LULAC. Bye-bye.